I'm here with Professor Lubomyr Luciuk, professor at Royal Military College in Kingston, Ontario. Welcome, Professor.
Thank you, Steve. Glad to be here.
It's rapidly become a cliche that COVID-19 changes everything. It certainly has had a tremendous impact on the way that we worship, the way that we gather to commemorate important events. Of course, this being the 75th anniversary of the end of the war in Europe, it's going to put a real damper on those celebrations. Recently, connected to that, there was an important religious and cultural and historic event took place in Kingston, and it had to take place in private. People weren't able to attend. Can you share that with our viewers who weren't able to attend?
Yes, with pleasure. Well, about a year ago, we were commemorating the 50th anniversary of the Ukrainian pavilion, the Lviv Ukraine pavilion at Folklore. And as we were ramping up for that celebration last June, we became increasingly aware of the fact that there were other anniversary dates coming up, one of which was the 75th anniversary of the first Ukrainian Catholic Divine Liturgy celebrated in Kingston on the 18th of March, 1945, just as the Second World War was coming to an end. The honorary captain, Father Michael Plaque, who was the first Ukrainian Catholic padre for the military chaplain, came to Kingston on that date and at the St. John the Apostle Roman Catholic Church celebrated the Mass. Now, there was quite a large audience there. The chief of police, the mayor, and others. It was reported in the Kingston Whig Standard at the time. We found those articles and decided that we should remember that date for two reasons. One, because in the religious history of this community, this was the first Ukrainian Catholic service. Secondly, because the audience, it was described as a large audience that attended that event, were still men and women in uniform who were going to serve overseas. And we wanted to commemorate the sacrifice and the service of all those men and women, in particular the Ukrainian Canadians who were here, but all Kingstonians who went overseas. So we organized the production of an icon of Christ Pancrator and a trilingual plaque, English, Ukrainian, and French, that quotes Captain Plaque, what he said that day is reported in the Whig, and recalls this historic occasion. Originally, of course, as you can imagine, we expected this to be quite a public event. We wanted to have students from the Royal Military College, where I teach, from Queen's, where I've taught in the past, and other dignitaries and VIPs to attend and join us. And Friar David Collins at St. John's was very excited about this, very supportive, as was the parish. We're very grateful. And so we'd sent out invitations, had done that by late January into February, and then, of course, we started to get news reports about the COVID virus. At that point, we were still not sure whether we could go forward, but we decided that for the safety of the public, we would reduce the event to essentially the private unveiling of this plaque and icon at St. John the Apostle Church, its blessing, and that would be it. And so we went from expecting perhaps as many as 100, 150 Kingstonians and VIPs and guests to attend to just a very small handful of people. Of course, Friar David welcomed us to St. John, and just as his predecessor had welcomed Ukrainians there 75 years before that. Mayor Brian Patterson was present. We were very grateful for the kind words he said. Reverend Stanford Luciuk spoke to the experience of men from that time. Stan Luciuk is, I think, fairly well known around Kingston. What's perhaps less well known is that his brother, one of his cousins, Flight Lieutenant Steve Luciuk, died in battle in November of 1943 with the Royal Canadian Air Force. So Stan could speak to the actual experience of being someone who has a loss in his family, and a Ukrainian Canadian, and my sister was there, Nadine Luciuk. So we had just a small handful of us, but we were able to witness the unveiling of this icon and its blessing and its installation in the church, and that's where it is to this day, hallowing the sacrifice and service of these men and women who served overseas from Kingston and other parts of the country, recalling, of course, the concluding months of the Second World War. So we did what we had to do. Obviously, we were all disappointed that it couldn't have been a more public event, but that's less important, I think, frankly, than the fact that we did it. We probably couldn't have done it if it had been a week later. It just happened that we caught it just in time. And by doing that, we've now left something behind. So Kingstonians in the future, when all this passes us by, will be able to go to St. John the Apostle. I've had many emails from people who say, I wish I could have been there. I'll go there as soon as I can, as soon as the church is reopened. So I think a lot of people will see that, that commemorative plaque and that memorial, the icon, and remember an important episode, as you pointed out at the start, in the history of Kingston. And that's what it's all about. I'm a Kingstonian born and raised. The Ukrainian community here is quite small, but we've had folklore in the Lviv Ukrainian Pavilion for 50 years, making that one of the longest running Ukrainian Canadian folk festivals in the country. We have a remarkable history here. We commemorated that last year with the Enduring Roots Monument that's available for viewing at City Hall when City Hall is open. And there are other places around town that are important. So it's a small community, but a very active one and an influential one in terms of the Ukrainian diaspora. And we'd like to give back. So this was, again, one of the ways in which we remembered Monsignor Byrne and St. John the Apostle Roman Catholic Parish and how kind and welcoming they were 75 years ago. Well, of course, we weren't there, but it's important. It's important to have that continuity. It's an important episode in our city's history. I grew up here. I went to Regis, St. Patrick's, the parish on St. Patrick Street, I should say, was a parish that many of my friends went to as young lads when I was growing up with them. So, I knew kids that went to St. John. I went to St. Mary's because it was close to my house. But we all chummed together, whether we were Irish or Italian or Polish or Ukrainian. And that was one of those major focal points of the community. So it gave me real pleasure, and my sister Nadia, to come back and on behalf of the Ukrainian Canadian Club to thank St. John, the Roman Catholic parish today, recall what happened 75 years ago, and leave something behind that people will look at hopefully in years ahead, passers-by, the faithful, and others visiting that church.
And thank you for doing that, and also for coming on the show today to explain a little bit about it, and with people who weren't able to attend, many of whom I'm sure were tremendously disappointed but understanding of the
Yes.
of the circumstances. If people want to get more information, we don't have a lot of time today, but if people want to get more information about this important historical event and the contribution of Ukrainian Canadian soldiers, and learn a little bit about Father Plaque, where can they go on the web to find that?
Well, there isn't actually that much. There is a Facebook page that the Ukrainian Canadian Club of Kingston maintains, and there will be a little bit of information there. There really isn't a whole lot. I mean, there's a nice plaque and a statue that we had done last year that's in City Hall, but that's, of course, not available to people right now either. And an Enduring Roots text. We're hoping to put up a plaque in the city, a Kingston Remembers plaque in due course somewhere along Rideau Street, because that's where most of the Ukrainians used to live. There is, of course, the Gaskin line, and there's a little bit of work done there because it was the Ukrainian community in Kingston that restored the line some years ago. So there's a plaque there as well. There's not a lot. You can find some, I would say, by going to the Facebook page of the Ukrainian Canadian Club of Kingston. And of course, you can Google for information. You'll find some things online. So there is a little bit about it, but it's not as well recorded a history as you might think.
Well, maybe one of the positive things that'll come out of everybody at home and being stir crazy is that maybe fellow armchair historians like myself will maybe be inspired by this to do some digging and find some stuff out.
I was delighted to learn in recent weeks that efforts are being made now to digitize the entire collection of the Kingston Whig Standard and the Daily British Whig before it. That's an important source. I mean, when I was reading the Whig Standard from March of 1945, I was finding all sorts of information in there about people I know or families I've heard of that I perhaps in some ways long forgotten about. So, the value of a daily local newspaper was reemphasized for me when I was doing the research for this plaque. So yes, and we're all a little bit stir crazy now. That's true, but we're staying safe. I hope as a community. I've seen a lot of positive messaging going on. I'm grateful to YourTV for what you're doing by updating the community with your daily bulletins and information, and having people like me on to talk about, there are still things we can do and research and think about it and talk about and share with others in our community as we all hunker down for a little bit longer to make sure that we're all safe.
On that note, I'll ask you the most important question of all. How are you doing and your family? How are you coping with this?
We're fine. I mean, we've followed all the measures that have been advised by the public health authorities. We've stayed at home. Well, you can probably see behind me as a professor, I have a large library. So I've got lots to read. And of course, it's that time of year when you're marking student papers. So I'd be home probably marking papers anyway. I miss my students at RMC. They're a great bunch of young men and women from all across Canada who serve this country. And it's an honor and a privilege for me to have been a professor there now for over 30 years. I miss them, frankly. That's about the only thing that I'm suffering at this point. I'm healthy, so is Catherine, and we're doing the best we can to just get things done. I spent a couple of days, frankly, cleaning the library and the books when this all first happened. That was a 3-day job that I didn't anticipate, but I'm glad I did it now. I would have probably let it go for another few more years until I was retired. But you do that kind of thing. We call our neighbors, we call older friends, we stay in touch with people by phone or by FaceTime or Skype, and just make sure that people are okay. We'll get through this, and I think you have to be of good cheer, as Champlain said way back at the start of Canada in those early desperate winters. Be of good cheer, take care of your neighbors, keep an eye out for those in need. I can't go to church this Easter, obviously, so I've made some donations to several charitable organizations in the Kingston area and region because I think it's important to help those who have less than I do. And that's my way of sort of giving back at Easter. I'll say a prayer and I'll remember the Ukrainian Canadians who served 75 years ago and all the Kingstonians who went overseas, and keep doing what I do.
Well, I can't think of a better note to end this on. Professor, thanks for visiting with us today, and we hope to talk to you again at some point in the future.
Thank you. My pleasure, and stay safe.